Welcome to the Self-Aware Entrepreneur on the start of another week. The middle of May, it's a little bit wet, but you know what? Any weather, we can handle that. So joining me today is the amazing Verity Hart of After the Storm, which is, a project, something relatively new, but really creating space and making change, and something that I really not only admire, but I'm likely to be a part of in the future. And Verity's, journey has been an interesting one. She's, incredibly talented. She's managed change. She's worked in a number of different industries, and she's really, again, climbed barriers and obstacles and faced significant challenges on that journey, but always been resourceful, been resilient, and found ways to get through them to ensure that she's still been able to help people, which is something that's really close to her heart. So Verity, thank you for joining me on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Lee. It's great to be here.
No, it's always a pleasure. And having spoken before, your passion for, creating spaces, helping people is something that kind of shines through in every conversation that we've had. So tell me a little bit more about After the Storm.
Okay, so After the Storm is an online platform. It's full of resources and also service providers to help people that are going through times of challenge or change in their lives, but also personal growth as well, and recognizing that kind of interconnectivity between the things that impact us in life on our mental health and well-being. So yeah, we're almost, I think we sort of started about a year ago actually putting together the ideas, so it's quite good to be talking about it.
Yeah, and I think that reflectiveness is really powerful, and what I really liked when we spoke is that interconnective elements, because our mental well-being doesn't exist as an island. And even when I'm working with organizations, we're actually looking at how do all the different areas of well-being, physical, mental, emotional, financial, social, intellectual, how do they all interlink? Because they all impact each other. And another bit as well that I really appreciated was getting clear on that credibility within the well-being field. There's a lot of people, a lot of heart-centered people, a lot of experts, a lot of people, with strong opinions, but actually being able to cut through the noise of what is, quite a big and growing industry to find that credible and simple, actionable information is really important. So that's, as a platform that amplifies that, it's a great place to get that, that cutting edge, but still in a way that's presented so that everyone can access it.
Yeah, I think that was something that was really important to us, given my personal experiences and not really knowing where to go for credible information. We wanted to make sure that we put in place a kind of vetting, but also that we're not being prescriptive, because what works for me wouldn't necessarily work for you. So it's giving people that kind of space to explore and find the right fit for them and when they're going through their challenges.
Yeah, and again, just that ability for people to find their own individual way of, managing their own self-care and the different aspects, being able to kind of experiment almost to find what works for them. But knowing that the things that they try aren't just ideas that someone's come up with, but are actually tried, tested, evidence-based already, allowing people to kind of go and feel they can access trusted resources, try them for themselves, and know that if they don't work for them, it's not a case of because they don't work, but actually it's just something that, there's another way for you to find benefit in that aspect. So what I want to do, Verity, is actually dig into what generated you to create such a platform. Tell us, just a little bit about the start of your own journey.
Well, I guess, it all came around at the start of lockdown, just because we were in isolation. My daughter was a bit ill, and I was struck by how many more people, I was thinking, gosh, people are going to be on furlough, they're going to lose their jobs, there's going to be people that don't have activities to occupy them. I saw loads of memes and things on Facebook about people drinking in the day and all that kind of stuff, and thought, my gosh, actually, and obviously with the tragic loss of COVID and people actually dying, I thought there's a lot of people who are going to be impacted by things that I've been through in my personal journey. And what would I have needed and what would have been good for me at that time. And therefore, this sort of after the storm came together. Because I guess just from my personal journey, so my childhood, my parents were great. They did absolutely everything they could to give me and my sister, a really good education and a solid sort of family foundation. But at times it was coloured by their relationship with alcohol. And as we got older, my dad's drinking got worse and my mum's drinking got better. So it kind of, we had two sides of things. But I think that impacted me massively as a child and as a teenager, and led to all sorts of issues between my sister and myself. And both of us had really bad relationship with food and body image. And mine sort of manifested in bulimia when I was around sort of 13 onwards. And my sister's in what I'd call compulsive eating. So she was really large. I sort of was very skinny but poorly with it, and we never really understood each other. And I'm the kind of person that fixes things. So if there's something wrong with me, I work through it and I fix it. Whereas she didn't find that so easy. We have very different mindsets. So I guess that was one element, and I didn't know where to turn when I was young to support with that. And then I also managed to conquer my bulimia, but put on a lot of weight myself then, and I did. I went to a local slimming club after my children were born and decided to do something about that, because for me it was really important to be present in my children's lives. My sister opted to have gastric surgery and got into debt in so doing, and led to a whole spiral of behaviour for her, unfortunately, with alcohol addiction at the end of it. So that's been really challenging, and I've got elements of that have affected my life. And then recently, sort of in the last 3-4 years, lost both my parents through different circumstances, and the impact that has had on both myself and my children has been massive. And I did not know where to turn. I know when you're going through that period of life, the funeral directors provide you with resources. But I think, well, for me, definitely, I was in such a spin, it's all consuming, that I didn't really take on board what was available or the help that was there. And almost sort of 6 months down the line, you go, oh, I'm not in a good place. I need some support. Where do I go? And so I think with my dad's passing, which was very quick and traumatic, was very different to my mum, who had an illness. She had cancer. So we had a bit more kind of time to prepare for it. But interestingly, only now, when mum passed away, it will be 2 years in July, I've started on my own grief coaching journey, because it's taken to this point in time for me to open the door on my emotions, which I had shut very firmly behind a door to get me through that period. It's very, very interesting. And everybody's journey will be different in that respect. But that just, as you can see, sort of all those elements we support through after the storm. And then after mum died, my sister's drinking spiraled out of control. I mean, she was, I think she had an accident due to it, and she was sent home from work because they realised what was going on. And she finally admitted the level of sort of illness that she was at. And actually, my word, I didn't realise. I mean, I like a drink, but I always thought, you just stop drinking. Why don't you just stop drinking? Like, why don't you just go on a diet? Why don't you just do something about it? And actually, for her, she was physically dependent on alcohol, and it is a vile disease. And it is, for somebody supporting somebody going through that, I didn't have a clue where to turn to get help or how to help her. It always you find yourself in that kind of conflict situation because, you know, an addict is unreasonable. They are selfish in their disease. And, you know, I'm not qualified to deal with that. just me, quite an emotional human being. And that led to some really, really tricky times. We got her into detox, and she came out of detox 2 days before we went into the first lockdown. And that, I mean, for her, she doesn't have her own family. I'm her only family sort of left, and not because of her addiction as well, not many close friends or a strong support network. So I'm actually very proud of her for getting through that period of time. And she hasn't relapsed. I think she's had a couple of blips, but she's on her journey and she's really strong-minded. And through all our differences, which I think we will always have, I'm very proud of her for that. It takes a lot, I think, especially in this strange year and a bit that we've been in, to be able to do that. So all those bits, I think you can see, sort of led to where After the Storms come from. I think also added to that the impact of my mum's death on my children. So I've got 3 girls, 15, 12, I'm trying to remember their ages, and 9, so they're all actually spread out. They were obviously younger when it happened, and it impacted my eldest and my youngest daughters really, really badly and differently. And my youngest one got very angry and upset and emotional at school, and my eldest daughter ended up slapping one of her friends around the face, which was just like, what? I mean, so out of character. And then as well, add to that, to be told that she would have to be excluded from school for the morning because they had to be seen to be doing something, which is absolutely fine. On top of my grief and her grief. And I mean, how do you deal with that? It was a very, very difficult time. So that's another element that we've got in After the Storm is youth support, because I think all too often, you know, we focus on all these areas, but there's a different way to communicate with children and to understand what they're going through. And I just wanted to make sure that those resources were there for young people and for parents alike, to know where they can potentially look for that support across all these different pillars, but in the eyes of a young person.
And
my story, Lee.
and I mean, if you just look at the sheer amount of facets that, you know, of things that you've been through, you know, we're looking at all the way from body image and eating disorder, you know, through to supporting family with addiction, grief, and, you know, all that has been part of your journey and really fueled those different areas. Because if we kind of look at, you know, especially around addiction and body image and eating disorders, well, there's not the massive awareness pushes that there has been, like there has been for, you know, mental health in general, and some of the other campaigns that have really pushed forward. And unfortunately, especially for, you know, those 3 aspects, there's still an awful lot of judgment. There's still an awful lot of, you know, potential to be trolled online if you decide to be a bit vulnerable about it. So, I mean, from my perspective, obviously, the work that you do is amazing. But I want to ask, how did you manage those different elements while you built your own career?
I guess from the eating disorder side of things, I was pretty much all right before I kind of came into my career. So, but from the addiction side of things and the stigma that goes around that, and the turbulent nature of the relationship that me and my sister had, at sometimes, you know, some of the behaviours coming from her and had been through our lives. And I don't want to sound, please don't get me wrong, I'm not a victim in all of this. I you know, it's family dynamics, but it can be quite damaging and quite difficult to know how to respond. And you find yourself in a position going, well, I don't actually like this person, so why on earth am I supporting them? And your frustration with that is difficult. And you're in the workplace and you know that this stuff is going on. So whilst mum was ill, my sister she checked out and I was having to, you know, do all the hospital appointments with mum, all that kind of stuff, which was a privilege to spend that time with her and to be that close to her through her sort of last year of life, but also having to see the hurt that my mum experienced because of that, and that frustration that then builds up within me as a person, just wanting to, quite frankly, shake my sister and say, not now, this isn't about you now, this needs to be about somebody else. And there have been times, you know, where I would probably say my work has suffered. I've done my best to try and leave things, you know, at the door. I'm very good at compartmentalizing. As I said, I shut that door, keep it shut. But that in itself has negative impacts, and is something that I've realized more and more as I've been on this journey with We Are After the Storm, is actually you have to start to face some of these things. I've been telling these stories and my emotion has been, you know, coming up, bubbling up to the surface. We seem to be okay with the grief side of it now, but me and my sister have got some stuff we've got to work through. But, you know, how do you express that in the workplace? I'm self-employed, so I go into companies as a contractor, as a consultant. I don't have an HR department to go and have a chat to. I don't have, you know, that support that is in place in some of these organisations for their employees. So for me, it's been very much, Verity, stiff upper lip, get on with it. Yeah. And I suspect that there are a lot of people who, even though they are employees within organisations, still feel that it's not to be brought into the workplace and you must just get on with it. Yeah. And I think those conversations have to be had. We have to start opening the door for those conversations.
Yeah, and I think that really kind of ties into some of the elements of After the Storm, but also some of the kind of elements and ethos of the work that, you know, me and a lot of the people that I collaborate with do around creating spaces for those conversations to be had that are psychologically safe, that do offer people the ability to be as vulnerable as they're able to and meet them where they are. Because so often in those supportive environments, people are able to realise that, firstly, more often than not, it's not just them who are going through these challenges. They also start to share, you know, gradually share stories as they bond. And when someone digs a little bit, it allows and gives permission for the next person to dig a little bit deeper. And that's how we start to, you know, forge real connections over these things. I think the other flip side, and something that we're starting to focus on really, is for those who don't have a support network or a support department, is to actually be able to build and facilitate peer support for those people. So if you work in a specific industry and you're freelance, you're a consultant, you stand alone, actually being able to find people who, you know, see the same industrial challenges as you, probably have some of the similar life experiences, and you can go and create those spaces and have it facilitated by someone who's able to, you know, offer a positive direction and create appreciative inquiry for us to really start to connect with those people and form support networks of people who really understand what we're going through.
Absolutely. I think that's why you and I kind of connected when we spoke, wasn't it? Because it's just, you know, we've got to create these spaces, and the way that you work is just, I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, and it's always challenging, especially as a small business owner, because it's likely that a lot of your interactions are networking based. And while there is an element of supporting networking groups, it does tend to be more transactional, more outcome focused. And obviously the ability to find these spaces as a small business owner, as an entrepreneur, as a consultant, as a freelancer, where you can share some of your concerns, where you don't need to have your business game face on, and where you don't need to build up the mask of, you know, being successful. It is increasingly important, and you know that's something that, you know, we're both working on. Which
absolutely.
Is really something that, you know, is increasingly important. So, Verity, can you tell us a little bit about how, you know, the things that you've learned from your experiences, and what advice you would give to people in a similar position as yourself?
From my personal experiences, or work, So, I think absolutely talk, try and find the information that's there for you. Go to We Are After the Storm, obviously, but no, I mean, you know, go and find those resources and that help, and be confident to tell your story. I think the only way that we will break these stigmas and get rid of the taboos is if we keep talking. We have to have these conversations, you know. Show your vulnerability. It's strength. And, you know, being able to say, I've been through this, I've survived, not a victim, I'm doing something to create a positive out of what I've been through to help other people. But I think the more of us that talk, the more of us that reach out, and the more of us that are comfortable to say, I've been through this, but I've come out the other side, hence we are after the storm, you know, the better. So we all go through storms in our lives, but we can get out the other side and do something good. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a great message, Verity. And, you know, I've been speaking recently about some of the elements of post-traumatic growth that we might be able to access after the pandemic, because there's no doubt we've all been through adversity. And if anything, it's been a little bit of a leveler in us realizing that adversity doesn't discriminate. As human beings, we're all going to go through challenges. And, you know, I like to say that our lives are like a big squiggly line. We'd love them to be this straight line that gradually increases upwards as we gain more experience, as we learn things. But actually, everything's just a big squiggle. And if we can accept that, when we fall into like the dips in the squiggle, we can still see the peaks in the squiggle that of the next one on the next journey. And it's so often being able to kind of accept that at times we're going to suffer. And, you know, a big element of your suffering, Verity, was from helping somebody else. And it's, you know, we don't often realize that it's not just us. It's a shared human experience. And sometimes we're sharing other people's journeys, which are challenging. And sometimes that actually becomes our journey while we support them through that.
Absolutely.
So it must be so, like, in some ways fulfilling to have seen how well she's done over this past year. And like you said, you've been honest, you know, you do have significant differences, but at the end of the day, your sisters, and, you know, you've been the one there for her, and that'll be something that'll stay with you forever.
Yeah, I hope so. And I don't want to sound like a martyr in that space. You know, she needed that support. She's done a lot of the work herself as well. You know, because for anybody that doesn't know anything about addiction, it really is worth trying to understand, because it's so difficult to know, you know, especially people you come across on a day-to-day basis, what they're actually going through and what led them to that kind of behavior as well. It's something that I've done a lot of research around since to understand. And I think there needs to be more awareness in the workplace, in society as a whole, to get away from that. Well, why don't they just stop?
And I think that can you give some like a little bit of a synopsis of that research, just a few little pointers for managers, leaders, what they might and should look out for?
I think, it's I did an actual course around it because I wanted to learn how to communicate, and it's the communication with the addict that's really important. I think so it's learning to respond as opposed to react, learning how to set boundaries and all that kind of stuff is so important, and they're your boundaries, and knowing how to stick with them. But for employers that are seeing somebody that might be going through this, I think, so for me, supporting my sister, I suspect I wouldn't have shown any signs other than maybe being a little bit more irritable, maybe a little bit more distracted than normal, that kind of stuff. And I think if you start to notice that with any of your employees, it's a sign that there's something going on, isn't it? It could be any aspect of mental well-being that is being disrupted. And when you notice somebody isn't themselves, it's giving them that safe space to have the conversation. You know, there's nothing quite like talking, is there, for people? And also resources, you know, make sure that those resources are available to them from a self-service perspective. But still, that's not enough. You know, automation of all of this isn't enough. Actually, we are human, we are social people, and we need those conversations.
Yeah, and this year has shown that more than ever, the ability to talk is really powerful. And that's
Mm.
something that's, been really pushed, especially with Mental Health Awareness Week. But I always like to preface that in that to be able to talk, you need someone who will listen.
Yes, very
And
true.
if you feel like you are heard, if you feel like you are appreciated and you feel like you are valued in a space, that's when it starts to become safe. That's when you start to, have and feel a level of trust to be able to share quite often the things that are potentially eating away at us, the things that are impacting us on a daily basis. So yeah, talk, space to listen, space to be heard, space to be vulnerable, and space to be open and sensitive with people who are non-judgmental and who will, ultimately give you the permission to step forward and be human like we all are.
Exactly.
So, that's something that I am really passionate about, and I know you are as well, Verity.
Yeah, absolutely.
But before you leave us today, can you tell us what's heading in the future for both yourself and We Are After the Storm?
Oh gosh, myself, who knows? I take every day as it comes. But We Are After the Storm. We're just looking to grow and refine what we're doing to get more credible resources onto the website, more practitioners, but also looking at how we can potentially support in the corporate space as well. I think there's lots to be done there. And again, with that kind of personal side of it, personal touch. Also, I will just say this, Lee, because hopefully we've got some people watching. Off the back of Davina McCall's documentary the other week, I put out a call to ladies or people that work in the area of menopause to get in touch, because we want to do an awareness month around it. And the response I've had actually has been overwhelming. I didn't quite expect it to be so good, but we're looking for people that have been through their own stories, practitioners that have got tips and advice, employers that are really good in this space that can help set a benchmark for how we can help, because menopause is something that affects 51% of the population. We need to start talking about it. So that's the next stigma that I'm on a mission with.
Yeah, no, and like we spoke about in our call, funnily enough, a month before it, went into the national sphere, it's one of those things that ultimately is guaranteed for so many people, and yet the awareness is challenging to spread. And a lot of talented women are finding themselves in a place where they're not really sure about where they are. There's no defined point where it happens. But and a lot of amazing ladies have actually found themselves struggling and not feeling like themselves. And obviously that is, that's something that as a world where we need talented women more than ever, is something that I'm really glad that you're pursuing, because the awareness from both a personal, community and kind of employer and corporate perspective is the needle's only just starting to turn. There's some amazing women out there talking about it, Laura and Sharon, people that I know, but that needs to increase, and I'm very much looking forward to be part of that, Verity, as well.
Yeah, fab. Yeah, I mean, we're just about, I'm not an expert, but if I can bring everything together, that connection, like you say, then we're on to something. But yeah, I'd love you to be part of that, Lee. Thank you.
Yeah. Super stuff. So thank you for joining us today, Verity. Quick shout out to Jo Britton. I know she was watching today and really kind of put some lovely comments in the chat for us. So yeah, we'll be back on Wednesday with another interesting guest. Watch out for the post tomorrow. And yeah, again, thank you, Verity, for joining me, and have a lovely Monday.
And you. Cheers. Bye.